Alright, so wrist palpation. The first thing we have is the anatomical snuff box. If you point your thumb up, this space right here, in between the extensor tendons, this little divot right here, that is the anatomical snuff box. And then right here, the bumps on either side of the wrist, at the end of the bones of the forearm, that is the radial styloid process right over here. And then on the other side over here is the ulnar styloid process. And then also on the dorsal side of the wrist, just inside the radial styloid process, we have Lister's tubercle right here. And then moving on to the wrist bones, so if you palpate through that anatomical snuff box, you'll be on the scaphoid bone, or from the radial styloid process, you could just come straight off it and then push in and you'll be on the scaphoid. The lunate is if you come to Lister's tubercle right here, and then you just slide right off that joint line, and that bone you press on is the lunate. And then the last of the proximal wrist bones, you have the triquetrum, so that's if you come off just the ulnar styloid and then just go right past that joint line over here, then you're on the triquetrum. And then to get the pisiform, you have to go onto this side of the wrist and then right down that superficial bump you feel right here is where your pisiform is. Then for the trapezium, you just come straight off of the base of the metacarpal of your thumb. So the metacarpal of your thumb is right here, and then if you come down to the base of it and go just off that, that is where your trapezium is, just right there, right there. And then trapezoid, that one is just off the base of the second metacarpal. So second metacarpal ends right about here, and then just slide right off it, and then you're on the trapezoid. To get the capitate, you go off the third metatarsal, so the third metatarsal comes down, ends right there. Then as you slide off that one, right underneath that is your capitate. And then off the base of the fourth and the fifth over here, if you slide, go down to the bases of those metatarsals and then slide just off that, right below there is where your hamate is. And then you also have your hook of your hamate, which is kind of underneath this hypothenar pad. So you kind of have to go through there. And find it. About right there. And then obviously you have all your metacarpals, which are the long bones right before you hit the phalanges. So the carpals end right there. And then each one of your metacarpals runs from about here to here, right along there. And then you have your phalanges, so your fingers up here, you have your proximal phalange right at the beginning, and then after that first knuckle, you have the middle phalange, and then after the last knuckle where the fingernail is you have that distal phalange. And then you could test, each of the joints has a ligament on it, and to test the ligaments you could just do like a little valgus varus test, which is valgus is you're just pushing from the outside in like that and gapping it like that, and then the varus one is pushing from the inside out like that. Then you have all of your major ligaments in your hand and wrist too. So your RCL ligament goes from like your radial styloid process up to the bone that's right next to it, which is the scaphoid. So So right here is your radial styloid process, your scaphoid just right there. So your RCLs are going to run right, my finger's kind of in the way, but it's like right in that joint line in between the two bones. It's going to run right there. And the way you test that is with ulnar deviation. So you take the wrist and then you deviate it out towards the pinky, and that'll stress that one. And then on the opposite side, the UCL of the wrist runs from that ulnar styloid process down here up to the triquetrum, the bone, the proximal carpal bone right there. So radial styloid process, or ulnar styloid process, and then the triquetrum is just right off it, so it kind of runs right on that lateral side right there. And then you have to do the radial deviation there, like that, to stress that ligament. You also have the whole arcuate ligament complex, which runs from like your ulnar styloid process and then comes up in a loop through the hand, where up through a loop through like the wrist and up into the hand a little bit, and connects a bunch of the carpal bones. So it'll run from ulnar styloid process over here to radial, and it'll come up and through like that. You then have your radial ulnar ligaments, which your radius right here, your ulna, it'll just run transverse right across, connecting these two bones right here, kind of right before you hit the carpal bones, just right from like the two styloid process, like around that line, just straight across right there. And you have one on your palm side and on like the dorsal side of your wrist as well. Then you have your dorsal radiocarpal ligaments, which start at the radial styloid process, and then will run to your scaphoid, which is the one right distal to the radial styloid. So right here, boom, straight to the scaphoid right there. One of them runs. And then you have one to the lunate, which is that middle carpal bone right off of Lister's tubercle. And then you have one that also runs to the capitate, which is the one that comes off the base of the third ray down here, base of that metatarsal. And as you come off that, that's where the capitate is. So it'll run from that radial styloid process up here, up into the capitate. You also have radiocarpal ligaments in your palm as well. Actually, I got that backwards. So the dorsal ones, they start at the radial styloid process and will come to all the proximal carpal bones in your wrist. So it'll start here and kind of come all the way across right here, where it connects to like the scaphoid, the lunate, the triquetrum, all the proximal wrist. The palmar one on this side is the one where it starts at your radial styloid up here, and then we'll go to your scaphoid, right, that scaphoid bone right there, the lunate right there, and then the capitate up here. You also have some ulnocarpal ligaments, so starting from your ulnar styloid down here, they will run, you have a ligament that will run to the triquetrum. They'll come across like this. It'll run from the triquetrum, which is just that bone just distal to the ulnar styloid process right there, just distal, so just right there, right to the triquetrum right there. And then the lunate, so that middle carpal bone over here, and then also your capitate again, which is that one in the off the base of the third ray right there, and the capitate. You also have intercarpal ligaments, so in between all of your carpal bones, all of them in here, you have ligaments that'll connect all the little carpal bones together, and you could try to glide the carpal bones around to stress test those. And then you also have the ligaments in between all your metacarpals up here, so that run metacarpal right here and right here, you'll have a ligament that runs in between these two, kind of in this gap right here across, to connect those to prevent them from separating. And that's it.